start a project, and this is something I've built before, and I need to recreate it because the one I built was actually for our daughter, and Sharon wants one. Here's some pictures of the coffee table I built for my daughter. It was made out of solid walnut, and it's a design based on one that she had seen at Room and Board, and it was ridiculously expensive. I said I can make that, not a problem. So this is the one that I want to duplicate so that we've got our own. What I have, this is the last of the walnut that I have. I'm going to make a coffee table. It's a really simple coffee table. And this is some nice, it's probably 6/4 walnut. And this is not the best of the walnut. This is the worst of it. This is what was left over. I bought, probably a half a pickup load of walnut and made a number of things out of it. And this is what I have now. So now that the workshop is done, I can get started on this. I'm going to start by cleaning out some of this wood. I've got a few of them with, I guess there's a big knot right here, and then there's actually some bark wood embedded, and it goes all the way through. And I don't have enough wood to cut this out, so I'm going to clean that out, and before I put it together, I will fill that with epoxy, and it'll just create some interest. So you can see this stuff here is really, really funky. Wouldn't want to leave it in there. And I've done this before. And when you get a little bit of epoxy in there, it completely fills that hole and stabilizes the wood. And you know, it sands just like wood once you've got it down. And it actually looks kind of cool. So we'll do that as we go. I'll be using these 3 boards for the tabletop. Now the 2 on the outside are both about 1.5 inches, and the center one is about 1 3/8 inches. So when I plane these down, I'll start with this one right here and figure out exactly what I can get out of it. I'm trying to make this as thick as possible. So I'll plane this one first, and once I'm done with this, I'll take these 2 down to match it. This walnut is all rough cut lumber, So now that I've got it surfaced, I need to get the edges straightened so that I can do glue up. And it's hard to tell, but if you take a look here, you can see there's a pretty good bow in that. So I will use a jig here. I'll take a piece of really straight plywood and make a jig so that I can get a nice straight cut on the table saw. So this piece of plywood has a really straight edge right on this side. So what I'll do is start by getting my board lined up, and I'm going to be cutting off of this edge and using this edge against the fence as my guide. And I think what I'll do is just use a couple of finish nails. I'll be cutting the ends of this off anyway, but I'll get a couple finish nails in the end here just to hold this in place. Okay, we're ready. So before I start my cuts, I want to make sure that my blade is at 90 degrees to the table, so I get a nice square cut. To do that, I'm going to use this thing called an angle cube, and we'll start by zeroing it out on the base of the table. Alright, so now we're at 0, and all I need to do is put it up on the blade here and bring that to 0. The wrong way. There it is. We're right at 90 degrees now and ready to go. I'll be using these biscuits to get these aligned before I glue them up. And they really don't, I don't need them for strength. Once I've edge glued these, this will be one piece of wood. But what these do is they help align things. If you look right here, you see where this edge is up a little bit from this. There's a little bit of movement in these boards. This will just help get that aligned. And I'll have to sand these anyway when I'm all done, but it'll shorten up that process. I won't have quite as much to sand because this will help get those where they need to be. So I'll start by just marking some spots across each of these so that when I do the cut on for the biscuits, that they end up in the right place. So these two pieces are actually cut probably just consecutive from the same log, and they both got the same knot. So what I wanted to do was get these lined up. So use the square, line those up as best I could, Now what I'll do is just go along and mark the places where I want to put in those biscuits. So I jumped ahead and glued up the legs. Didn't think you needed to see more of the same. These are two separate units. These two are glued together and these two are glued together here. And I just clamped them all in one set of clamps. So those legs will now be cut to length, sanded, and can be put underneath that tabletop. So I need to start by squaring up the ends on this tabletop. And this thing is too big to push through the table saw like it is right now. So instead I'll use my skill saw to cut this. I've got a good finish blade on it. And what I'll do is begin by just laying out a guide. And I know that from this edge to the inside of my saw is 1.5 inches. So I've marked a straight line already through here. And then I will use a combination of a carpenter's square or speed square and my tape measure to get myself within that 1.5 inches. I want to be right there. Alright, so this is laid out. Now I just need to clamp this down. Before I cut this, I'm going to run some tape, some painter's tape all the way along here. And this will help keep it from chipping out. Everything cut up, let's do a dry fit on this. Give me an idea of what it'll look like. I'm going to place the legs about this far apart. There we go. And let's get the top on this thing. Okay, that's pretty close. So that's what it'll look like. What I didn't show you is this stretcher will go down right between those two legs underneath this to give it some support. I'm waiting to cut this until we make a decision on exactly how far apart we want these legs. But at least you get an idea of what we're after here. I think I'm going to end this. It's getting to be a long video. I'll finish everything up in a part 2. What I intend to do for part 2 is to fill these voids with epoxy. Let that set up. Then I'll give it a good sanding, and finally we'll go through and put poly on everything, and only after all that's done, then I'll do my final assembly. So stay tuned.